Hey, you've done an amazing job so far. So you collected everything you needed physically, psychologically, personally, your papers and your phone. We talked about how to maintain the backpack. We've done some drills. I've given you some training to do. But now we're going to talk about the other things in your life that are really important to you. So we're going to talk about people. We're going to talk about pets. We're going to talk about your possessions, your property, all kinds of things. So today we're going to start in talking about using the 5-pocket method with the other people in your life. You may be someone who is taking care of another person. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone elderly. It could be a baby, right? And the baby can't take care of itself. And so do you have to have a disaster backpack for your baby? Yes. If you are taking care of an elderly parent, do they have to have a disaster backpack? Yes. Does it need to follow the 5-pocket method? Yes. Do you have to fill it for them? Yes, basically. You do want their input on things because there's certain things psychologically that are going to be important to them, but you want to make sure that it goes into their disaster backpack. So the point I'm making and the point of this video is now that you've completed your disaster backpack, now you need to create one for those around you who can't do it themselves when you are taking care of them. You should not, N.O.T, not include their things in your backpack. Your backpack is your backpack. Their backpack is their backpack. And it's going to have to be age appropriate, right? If you have a child, that's going to be different than obviously what an infant would need or a toddler. And if you have teenagers who you are taking care of, are they going to be able to fill the disaster backpack by themselves? No, but you can give them a lot of guidance and then they'll fill it on their own, right? You can help them and make sure they have what they need, but then they can ultimately fill it. If you're taking care of someone elderly, it's the same thing. You're going to ask them a few things, making sure they have all the elements, and you're going to make some contributions for things that clearly they're not thinking about and incorporating it, make sure their papers are in there. Those are the things that are going to be really important. Sometimes they may not be even computer savvy. They don't have things on thumb drives. You're going to do it for them. You're going to put their documents on a thumb drive and put it all in there. So let me mention a few things about this part of the process. First is that when you are putting things into the backpack for someone who is really what we would call vulnerable, so it is someone you are taking care of, they're dependent for some reason, you do want to get their input on things that are important to them because you want them to have a stake in what goes into that backpack. However, secondly, there may be things where they don't want certain things in the backpack that you do need to add in there. So again, sometimes people don't want to be reminded the fact that they may have to eat certain kinds of disaster food, or they don't want to do this. And I totally understand that, but those are things that still have to go in there anyway. But all the other rules apply. You need to make sure they have tasted the disaster food in advance. Make sure that they are used to, if you are going to use water packets, make sure they have tasted the water packets directly out of the packet itself. If it's a baby, you don't necessarily have to do that, right? It can go into a bottle, right? But making sure that they've actually tasted it and making sure that whatever's in there that they actually want to consume and eat. Making sure that all the other items and things that are going to be important to them are in there. If you are taking care of someone who is elderly, maybe they have dementia, there may be things that they ask to put into the backpack that you shouldn't put in there. For example, one of the things that should never go in a disaster backpack is alcohol. Alcohol should never be placed in a disaster backpack, period. Never. Because it impairs your judgment, it can create a spiraling, it can create depression, it can be something that impairs your ability to be able to operate in a disaster, and you need to be as focused as you possibly can. Even if you're dependent on it and you say, I have to have alcohol in order to be able to operate, you cannot and should never put alcohol into a disaster backpack because it is just simply not a good idea. It's just is not something that is a positive way of accessing the backpack because it actually acts as a hindrance. The alcohol ultimately makes it worse than better. Whoever you're taking care of, just make sure that what you're putting in there are things that would be okay for them, and make sure also that they're not asking to put inappropriate items into the disaster backpack that wouldn't apply. But the point is, find a backpack, put all the items in there, use the 5-pocket method, make sure you go through all the previous days, have a checklist, put every single thing in there as you go through these videos again, because it'll help you to understand what they're going to need. I have done disaster programs for hundreds of skilled nursing facilities around the United States, and I will create a separate video in the future where I actually talk about the 5-pocket method specifically as it applies to those who you are caregiving. But no matter what, make sure that each backpack for each person is distinct. Do not intermix them because everyone's disaster program is going to be a little bit different. This is Disaster Patrick. Remember, prepare for a disaster and you'll never experience one.